Hey everyone, I'm Shane Thomas of Upstream Ag Insights. Thanks for joining the audio video edition of Upstream Ag Insights for January 9th, 2022. Looking forward to doing a little bit more audio video for 2022. I'm primarily focused on writing for Upstream, but want to try and move things and try a few different formats and that sort of thing. And so to start this week, going to do this audio video edition where kind of pick three of the stories from Upstream, talk a little bit more about them, highlight them, and actually make a basic slide deck available for everybody to check out as well afterwards, as just another way of seeing what's happening in ag tech and agribusiness. And so with that, we'll get started on the big three of the week, where I'm going to talk a little bit about the 2022 Upstream Ag Insights Outlook. So just some of the different areas that I'm going to be watching throughout the rest of the year. The announcement from John Deere announcing their autonomous tractor at Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. And then the Stenon Rays, soil testing company, soil sensor company out of Germany that raised 20 million actually in December, but didn't have any additions of Upstream between then and now. And then a couple quick hitters on the Nutrien CEO Change and Quantifying Partnerships in the Agrifood industry. And so to start, the 2022 Upstream Ag Insights Outlook. So I really tried not to make a bunch of predictions by any means, but talk a little bit about what I'm watching, what I'm interested in, what I want to learn about throughout the rest of the year, and some background on why that is. And so I lay out 10 different areas, and I'll go through them here relatively quick, and then I'll zero in on three of them and talk a little bit more. And so the first is big tech in agriculture. So the Amazon, Microsoft, Google's, for example, consolidation and partnerships within the ag tech industry. New tech trickling into ag, so the Web3 blockchain sort of thing, metaverse or digital twins, augmented reality, how that could potentially be something that we start to see more talk of and utilization of in ag in 2022. Soil as a starting point. So I liked them as an agronomist for a lot of years, and I love the soil. I see a ton of potential in understanding it better. And so talking a little bit about what I see coming from there. More sustainability, more carbon credits, that sort of stuff that I don't think is a surprise to anybody. Watching the fintech and insurtech area of agriculture, the scalability of those are super compelling, and I think just given some of the things we're seeing within agriculture, whether it's more high value specialty fertilizers coming in, whether it's the commodification of some of the herbicides and crop protection products, all of a sudden for manufacturing companies and for other organizations can start to differentiate their products with a insurance or parametric insurance, more specifically sort of tool and capability. And so I find that interesting. Ag retail tech awakening. So just more tech coming into the ag retail landscape to utilize to support customer experience, customer services, that sort of thing. Commercial technology launches. So there's three that I'm really watching in terms of my interest. One is RNAi. So that's kind of a fascinating space that I dive a little bit more into within the Upstream Outlook edition. Autonomy, going to talk a little bit about that in a second. And then smart spraying. So your see and spray technology. So there's some commercial launches there this year that I think are going to be compelling to stay up on and look at. And then the public offering window closing in ag tech potentially. So I'll go through some of that here in a second as well. And then just more strategic data use within the industry is something I think we have a ton of opportunity to at the farm level, better support farmers in understanding and utilizing data, but then utilizing it for agribusinesses themselves in a collaborative fashion throughout the supply chain, that sort of thing. So those are the 10 that I really zero in on and wrote about this year. Quickly, I'll touch on the three big parts of big tech in agriculture. I think whether you look to 2021, we've seen Amazon doing different things and getting more in depth in India. We've seen them with some announcements more closer to home or closer to North America here with their partnerships with the Bayers and the Bushels, for example. Microsoft, same sort of thing, having some of their agreements with Bayer, for example, was a big one at the end of the year in terms of their partnership. And then you have Google, who has their mineral initiative throughout or in the US, and really that's a fascinating area, I think, is Google and what they're going to do this year. I've seen more, I would say, job postings for business development at the mineral side of things, from business development as well as partnerships. and as well, or sorry, product manager roles. And so I think we'll see a little bit more from Google this year as well too, as they have really been doing a lot of research in the space and really to move some things along and support agribusinesses. I think is one of the key things. I think if you look at Amazon, you look at Microsoft, you look at Google, I don't know if any of them are trying to disrupt in the way we kind of typically think of those companies disrupting industries, but I think there's going to be a lot of partnerships and support throughout the agriculture industry. And then the next that I'll touch on is the consolidation and partnerships, and the complexity of agriculture just continues to grow. It's obviously always been extremely complex. That's one of the really interesting parts of agriculture, is just how everything is intertwined, the size of the value chain, the complexity of geographies, all these different things. But as we've seen tech come in, it's getting more and more complex when you start to look at the digital needs. And I mentioned InsurTech and FinTech and sensor technology or remote sensing. It's getting more and more complex. And as things grow in complexity, all of a sudden partnerships become that much more valuable, because you need to be able to pull on other people's expertise, other people's capabilities, all those sorts of things. And so that's an area that I'm going to be thinking to watch a lot on, because I think we'll see more partnerships. And I actually highlight an article this week from John Gutella, who actually quantifies the growth in partnerships and relationships within the ag industry. And I think even on the consolidation front, we've seen really big years the last couple of years in terms of acquisitions and investments. I think in 2022, we'll see a even bigger number of mergers and acquisitions and just investment from some of the large incumbents within the industry. We've seen over the last couple of years, the number of venture deals and acquisitions kind of slowed down, but the total number of dollars invested and spent going up. And so that's a signal of some maturity, and a signal that I think we will continue to see some more consolidation. And again, it could get into even the number of point solutions out there, where we need to make things work more holistically for farmers to support them, so they don't have 37 different apps, or we don't have a situation like where you had Apple and Microsoft, and you had Windows not working, you had your Microsoft Word document didn't work on Apple. And so there's a ton of complexity when you do not have interoperability and you don't have some of the consolidation and partnerships in place. So I think that's going to continue to grow this year. And lastly, the public offering window closing in ag tech. And so last year I wanted to watch a lot of the organizations that we've talked a lot about go public. I speculated that there would be a lot of public announcements, a lot of companies going public via SPAC or IPO, and it didn't disappoint. 2021, we've seen numerous organizations go public, whether it was Farmers Edge through IPO, whether it was Ginkgo Bioworks, who's not entirely ag, but very closely related and supportive of agriculture. They have a relationship with Bayer. They went public via SPAC. Same with Planet Labs. And so we've seen numerous organizations go public, and it wasn't that good of a year for them in terms of market capitalization. So I believe collectively, Zimmergen, Farmers Edge, Planet Labs, Ginkgo, Benson Hill, collectively they were down something like 49% on the year. So really big losses. And if you put that into context with the NASDAQ was up around 25% in 2021. The S&P 500 was up something like 30% in 2021. And if you look at BlackRock actually has a ETF that is tracking of agriculture related companies. And I think he was up 35 or 36% in 2021. And so you look at that comparison of these ag tech companies down almost 50% on average, with some being down as much as 83%. Not a good showing from those organizations. And if you even look at the SPAC companies, not related to ag, but just in general in North America, they were down like 35+% in 2021, if not a little higher than that even. And so you look at that as a main vehicle for some ag tech companies to go public, and it doesn't look like it's going to be something that is supportive of more companies going public in 2022. And so I kind of question whether we'll see some of these companies go public, like the Farmers Business Network is a large one, Indigo Ag, Semios, big companies that have the potential to go public, but maybe they hold off for another year just to see how things are going, or maybe they really work to get their numbers in line so that they can go public and get some liquidity in 2022. So just some of the areas I'm watching there. And so with that, we'll move on to the John Deere autonomous tractor announcement. And so this one got a lot of buzz, a lot of interest, and for good reason. John Deere is obviously a big name. There's a lot of other organizations that have been talking about autonomy. You had Raven, who has had a couple acquisitions of Smart Ag and Dot Autonomous Farming. They got acquired by CNHI or Case. And so there's already some autonomy in the marketplace, and the Deere hadn't announced anything specifically, but we all knew it was coming eventually. They acquired Bear Flag Robotics in August for something like 250 million, and they've been investing in autonomy for a while. So this was just really what everybody knew was coming, but they finally announced it, and they're going to be starting with tillage as the core focus, which to me makes a ton of sense. That's where Bear Flag was focused in on. You really have a low risk sort of pass in the field where you can't really screw too much up, whereas with a planting or a spraying, all of a sudden there's a lot of risk there if things get done poorly. So you can really ease farmers into understanding how it works, getting comfortable with it. And it's also a very boring pass. I don't think anybody is super pumped to go sit in the cab for hours doing passes up and down the field, tilling the land. So really good starting point for Deere there. And they will be launching this product here in 2022. And just a few interesting points I think around this is really my friend Matt Coots actually was on the Business Breakdowns podcast talking about John Deere in late 2021, and he actually talked about the installment versus deployment stage in ag, or got asked the question about how do you know when the deployment stage is starting in ag and when is that going to start? And his comment essentially was, well, it's when Deere says it's going to happen. And that's because Deere has 185 years of brand built up. They have a ton of trust built up with their customers. They bring an air of legitimacy to any sort of technology and capability. And so when you think about the installment versus deployment stage, just to quickly touch on that, the installment phase is really based on, or really those two stages are based off of Carlota Perez's book, Financial Revolutions and Financial Capital. Really good book for anybody interested in kind of understanding VC and financing and capital and how things progress in the world. And so she talks about the installment stage versus the deployment stage. And the installment stage is really when you see a lot of capital going to really building some of the basic infrastructure and support to enable some of this new technology that is out there. And so we've seen a lot of dollars going into GPS capabilities, telematics capabilities, sensors, all those sorts of things for the last couple of decades. And now as we kind of move to the deployment stage, which is where you go from really kind of trying to make new things happen to really get to the commercial stage to be able to deliver a product into the market where there's demand for that change from the market, and where we actually start to see some working commercial products and tools and systems, and where we actually see the world begin to really change in terms of how that market accepts and utilizes different technologies. And so you now have Deere, who has said, hey, we have autonomy, we have all the capabilities, we're launching a product. And so we had this installment stage for a number of years, and now according to Matt's thoughts, which I agree with, I think he's spot on, we start to see Deere coming in, which means, hey, we are going to see more autonomy coming. We're going to see more interest in it from farmers. And really, I think we're going to start to see some more talk about autonomy. Not that we didn't see it, but when you have the largest equipment manufacturer with a product promoting it, talking about it, I think it's going to be huge for 2022. And it'll be interesting to see how that product progresses in the market. And just kind of on that marketing side of things, I think what was super compelling to me with what Deere did is they actually, instead of launching at an ag show, instead of launching it at, say, Agritechnica, which obviously was canceled this year, but I don't think they were planning on launching the autonomy at an ag show or Agritechnica at all. I think they'd been wanting and planning of going to the Consumer Electronics Show for the last couple of years and want to use it as a platform to they talk about really, supporting the consumer understanding of agriculture and the importance of technology and that sort of thing. But I think they also have some other benefits behind it, where they're a large publicly traded company, and when they're doing innovative things, that's buzzworthy to the market, that's buzzworthy to investors. And so when you actually look at how their stock did on Tuesday, I think it was that they announced it, January 4th, their stock was they announced it at the Consumer Electronics Show, where obviously get a lot of buzz. They got mainstream writing about them. They got a lot of talk on Twitter and that sort of thing. And their stock was actually up 6%. And so them launching their autonomy product at Consumer Electronics Show, bigger platform, bigger area to really get the word out to more individuals than just the ag community. They actually went up again 6%, but in terms of market capitalization, that was over $6 billion in market cap. And so I don't know what they spent on their marketing budget to get into CES and promote it and talk about it, but whatever they spent there, that paid off in spades, just because of how much buzz was created around that announcement. So I thought that was pretty cool and pretty smart from Deere this year already, for sure. And just quickly on the business models, they didn't announce pricing or anything like that, but you kind of can look at a few different angles, where Bear Flag, who they acquired, had a traditional, or they're traditional, but kind of unique in the market, was paying not for the tractor, but a farmer would pay X number of dollars for per acre or per field. I don't know the specifics of what they had going on there, but it was really more capital light from a business model perspective for the farmer to actually access that autonomy. I don't know if Deere will go that route necessarily right now, but it's an interesting route. The next is really one I've talked about numerous times in Upstream, is this Rolls-Royce model that they have. Their engine pricing for a lot of airlines is focused more on use. And so it's on hours of engine use. There's then the actual data going back to Rolls-Royce. So now the airlines are not paying, or airplane companies are not paying for X number of dollars for the engine up front. It's paid for based on the usage. It's paid for based on the actual utilization. And then they can actually create better services out of that. As Rolls-Royce, they can make sure that there's, call it, predictive analytics and predictive aspects to maintenance and stay on top of all that, so that there's actually a longer life out of that engine, for example. And so if we extrapolate that out to farming, all of a sudden we can see where there's the potential for a farmer not to spend $500,000 or whatever it is on a specific tractor, but maybe they pay X number of dollars per hour used on that piece of equipment. And so all of a sudden you start to get a unique model that goes on there. Or it might just be pretty simple, like we see today. Farmers buy a piece of equipment for $500,000 or whatever it is. There might just be an increased a dollar amount for the autonomy package on the 8R tractor, for example, or maybe there's a package where you need to purchase an enhanced version of RTK, so you have a more precise GPS aspect to it on top of buying the autonomy package. So those are kind of three basic ways that they could go about it, but I'm thinking that last one is really the easiest route to ease farmers into it for the start of autonomy anyways, and we'll see how it progresses from there. With that, we'll go on to the next, which is the Stenon Rays. And so Stenon is a soil sensor technology company, and so they actually have a call it handheld, kind of shaped like a soil probe, with sensors, 3 different sensors in the tip on it, and some digital capabilities and digital hardware on there to make sure that they can actually read what's going on in the soil. And so now, instead of having to go out physically, put your soil probe into the ground, take those cores, put them in a bag, take them to the office, send them to the soil lab, and then wait 7 days or 10 days, depending on how you ship it. Sometimes it can be less than that, but either way, there's probably a minimum of 48 hours in there, with upwards going out to 10 days, depending on the lab and that sort of thing. But now you can get an instant understanding of what is that soil texture? What is that nitrogen level? What is that phos level? pH, CEC. So really, we decrease the cost with this sort of technology, but then you also get a tighter feedback loop and understanding. So that's pretty compelling to me for farmers and for agribusinesses. They're actually selling these in Europe currently, direct to the farmer, and they sell them based on a subscription model where there's an annual fee associated with the hardware. You don't pay for the hardware; you just simply sign up for paying an annual fee to Stenon for that. So pretty interesting company there, and they're measuring essentially everything you would want besides micronutrients. So they get into nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, magnesium, texture, pH, organic matter, organic carbon, temperature, moisture. And so they're really collecting a lot of the important points for agronomists, for farmers to know and make decisions. And what's kind of cool is you start to get a pretty interesting data layer there, or a piece of information as a farmer, but then even for Stenon in terms of what they can understand about soil and can understand about production and that sort of thing. So pretty interesting. They do have 3 different types of sensors. The one name is escaping me, but one aspect is a spectroscopy component. So kind of your typical way of measuring soil with some of this new technology. And then there's an optical imaging component as well too, which is interesting. And they claim that it's pretty simple. They say it's accurate compared to labs, just like labs, and there's not a whole lot of calibration necessary with it. So pretty cool technology. And as somebody that really likes soil and sees what potential there is from not just the production side, but as we start to talk about carbon and sustainability, how can you decrease the cost to actually participate in those sorts of programs or understand what's happening with the soil from that sort of soil health component. So pretty interesting. And the last point on them is really the notable investors, which I think are pretty fascinating. So 2 of the investors were Founders Fund and the Production Board. And these are non-ag specific investors, but Founders Fund is, if you're familiar with Peter Thiel, that's his investment company. So they've invested in Airbnb and Facebook, Stripe, SpaceX. So all these large organizations that have been extremely successful. They were early investors in those organizations. And so says a lot about Stenon in my opinion, from that. The other aspect too is the production board is David Friedberg's company, who David is the founder of Climate Corp. And so him investing is super interesting to me, and I think really goes with some of their other portfolio companies. They're actually invested in Pattern Ag, which is looking at soil testing from more of a microbial perspective. So kind of interesting there. And they've also invested in Tillable. And so you can start to see where there's some interesting overlap that could be used as a, say, synergy between those organizations in the future. And so this is a really interesting company. I've been a fan of Stenon for a couple of years now, and have been following them and talked with their founders in the past. And so pretty interesting announcement from them. Last, we'll just do some quick hits. The Nutrien CEO changed again. And so in April of 2021, Chuck McGraw was left, I guess, as CEO, and Mayo Schmidt, who was the chairman of the board, went in as CEO, and that was about 8 months ago now. And as of the start of this week, so January 4th or something like that, they actually Mayo Schmidt is no longer the CEO, and they are now on a search for a new CEO. There is an interim CEO. The name is escaping me at this point, but he was the executive vice president of the Nutrien potash business. So he'll be the interim CEO until they find somebody else. I think this is quickly notable just because this is the 3rd major executive leaving in under a year. So you had Mike Frank, who was the head of the retail division, leave about February of 2021. And then you had Chuck McGraw in April, and now you have Schmidt in the beginning of 2022. And so lots of change there, but they've had huge quarters, huge growth. I mean, that's a lot of some of their strong strategic initiatives and endeavors, as well as partly some of the just macro climate in agriculture with fertilizer pricing and that sort of thing. And so be interesting to see who goes in there. somebody that's just kind of interested in the space. When Mike Frank left, I had assumed he was going to end up being the Corteva CEO, which is where Chuck McGrow actually ended up being the CEO now. So I wonder if maybe there's an opportunity for Mike Frank to be CEO of Nutrien. But we'll see. I think I'm sure when you get this sort of size of company looking for a new executive, it'll be a long, thorough search, and so it'll be interesting to stay up on that. Lastly, the quantifying of partnerships. So John Gatella, who I've talked to a couple times, super sharp individual. He actually did some interesting work where he started to look at all the different announcements around partnerships and strategic alliances in Agrifood. And I think he looked at this from 2018, 2019 into 2020. So kind of like a 3-year period where there was hundreds of announcements, and he really analyzed them to see how they were connected, if he could correlate them to other aspects of agricultural the macro environment. And so he had a lot of interesting findings. I won't even begin to try to dive into all of them because I think there was a lot in there, but it's worth checking out his work. But his work even created a model to show what could be happening in 2022, and consistent with my comments from the increase in partnerships and consolidation. That's what his work is showing will occur in 2022 and beyond. And so super interesting work from him, and I encourage you all to check that out. And with that, got a little longer winded than I wanted to, but if you have any suggestions on what you want to see from an audio perspective or from a video perspective, I need to kind of work on some of my editing skills, some of my thoughts around the actual layout and the way I deliver some of this information. But if you have any feedback, please send me an email, upstreamaginsights@gmail.com, or just respond to the email itself that comes from Upstream each Sunday, or reach out to me on social media, whether it's on LinkedIn or on Twitter as well too. Happy to have a conversation, and just looking for some different ways to progress Upstream. So any comments are appreciated, and looking forward to doing this again next week, and hopefully you all have a great week. Thanks.